I'm going to read an excerpt from Radical Acceptance, Embracing Your Life with the Heart of a Buddha by Brach. Learning to pause is the first step in the practice of radical acceptance. A pause is a suspension of activity, a time of temporary disengagement when we're no longer moving toward any goal. Unlike the frantic pilots, we stop asking, what do I do next? The pause can occur in the midst of almost any activity and can last for an instant, for hours, or for seasons throughout life. We may take a pause from our ongoing responsibilities by sitting down to meditate. We may pause in the midst of meditation to let go of thoughts and reawaken our attention to the breath. We may pause by stepping out of daily life to go on a retreat, or to spend time in nature, or to take a sabbatical. We may pause in a conversation, letting go of what we're about to say, in order to genuinely listen and be with the other person. We may pause when we feel suddenly moved, or delighted, or saddened, allowing the feelings to play through our heart. In a pause, we simply discontinue whatever we're doing, thinking, talking, walking, writing, planning, worrying, eating, and become wholeheartedly present, attentive, and often physically still. You might try it now. Stop reading and sit there, doing no thing, and simply notice what you are experiencing. A pause is, by nature, time limited. We resume our activities, but we do so with increased presence and more ability to make choices. In the pause before sinking our teeth into a chocolate bar, for instance, we might recognize the excited tingle of anticipation and perhaps a background cloud of guilt and self-judgment. We may then choose to eat the chocolate, fully savoring the taste sensations, or we might decide to skip the chocolate and instead go out for a run. When we pause, we don't know what will happen next. But by disrupting our habitual behaviors, we open to the possibility of new and creative ways of responding to our wants and fears. Of course, there are times when it's not appropriate to pause. If our child is running toward a busy street, we don't pause. If someone is about to strike us, we don't just stand there resting in the moment. Rather, we quickly find a way to defend ourselves. If we're about to miss a flight, we race toward the gate. But much of our driven pace and habitual controlling in daily life does not serve surviving, and certainly not thriving. It arises from a free-floating anxiety about something being wrong or not enough. Even when our fear arises in the face of actual failure, loss, or like the military pilot's death, our instinctive tensing and striving are often ineffectual and unwise. Taking our hands off the controls and pausing is an opportunity to clearly see the wants and fears that are driving us. During the moments of a pause, we become conscious of how the feeling that something is missing or wrong keeps us leaning into the future, on our way somewhere else. This gives us a fundamental choice in how we respond. We can continue our futile attempts at managing our experience, or we can meet our vulnerability with the wisdom of radical acceptance. During my pause in the desert sanctuary, I began to see how utterly stuck I was in the stories and suffering of trance. By staying put and not occupying myself with other activities, I faced the shame and fears that I had been running from for years. In fact, pausing and accepting the intensity of my suffering was the only way I could have released the grip of trance. Often the moment when we most need to pause is exactly when we feel most intolerable to do so. Pausing in a fit of anger, or when overwhelmed by sorrow or filled with desire, may be the last thing we want to do. Like the high altitude pilots, letting go of the controls seems to run counter to our basic and instinctual ways of getting what we want. Pausing can feel like falling helplessly through space. We have no idea of what will happen. We fear we might be engulfed by the rawness of our rage or grief or desire, yet without opening to the actual experience of the moment, radical acceptance is not possible. Charlotte Joko Beck, Zen teacher and author, teaches that the secret of spiritual life is the capacity to return to that which we have spent a lifetime hiding from, to rest in the bodily experience of the present moment, even if it's a feeling of being humiliated or failing, of abandonment, of unfairness. Through the sacred art of pausing, we develop the capacity to stop hiding, to stop running away from our experience. We begin to trust in our natural intelligence, in our naturally wise heart, and our capacity to open to whatever arises. Like awakening from a dream, and the moment of pausing, our trance recedes and radical acceptance becomes possible.